Anyways, let's move on to a story that I'm super excited to talk about. Eddie Van Halen. Last week, I talked about how I don't like rock and roll. This week, we're going to lead off with a little bit of rock and roll, right, Kate?
Yes, I, for one, love rock and roll. So Eddie Van Halen once held a gun to Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst's head.
This article is actually written by GuitarCenter.com.
Hell yeah. Oh, man.
Long-time stoolies.
That's one of those stores that I'm always like, do they need a whole center? Who's going there? Do they need a Walmart-sized store for guitars?
There's lots of brick and mortar places, I think, about that.
Like Mattress Firm, which God bless them, they're great. I think they might be a
the leather recliner stores. There's a bunch of them here in Texas. How many people are buying leather?
I guess a lot. I guess a lot. Anyway, so Eddie Van Halen gun to Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst's head following a jam session. That is, according to a new book by filmmaker Andrew Bennett. The book, Eruption in the Canyon, 212 Days and Nights with the Genius of Eddie Van Halen, chronicles Bennett's time with the electric guitar player in 2006 and 2007 when he was filming Van Halen at Eddie's home studio to document the band's reunion tour. So the Durst shenanigans took place several years earlier when Eddie and Fred were introduced at a party shortly after Limp Bizkit guitarist Wes Borland's exit from the band.
That's the guy, the bass guitar player with the crazy black eyes.
With the crazy eyes. Yeah. Big time street cred for that band. Very good. After it was
he used to scare me, honestly. Like that was when I was big time into Christian stuff. And I was nervous about that fella conjuring some demons.
So their guitarist, Limp Bizkit's guitarist, had left, and they're at this party, and Fred Durst is talking to Eddie Van Halen, and somebody was like, you know what, Eddie, you should work in Limp Bizkit. You should be the new guitarist. So Durst responded that it would be hilarious. The greatest guitar player ever plays with the worst band ever. Ha ha ha. The next day, he went to get his gear from the Beverly Hills house, and Bennett's description goes from there. So Eddie rolls up to this house where he was. I guess I was a little confused by how this all went down or why Eddie Van Halen was even mad in the first place.
So he had all of his stuff because Eddie Van Halen is not a weed guy at all. And when they came to the houses, Eddie Van Halen doesn't even like to be around weed, the smell of it or anything like that.
Oh, I didn't know
they
that.
all started smoking weed at this place that Eddie Van Halen was, and he wasn't having it. So he like stormed out and came back the next day. He had already bought this armored tactical vehicle, and it had a turret. So technically in LA, it was illegal. Like you're not allowed to ride those with a turret on the back.
Old man Eddie Van Halen is pissed then at that there was weed and whatever and stuff going on at this party that he didn't like. So Eddie brings this assault vehicle that he bought at a military auction that has a shine gun mount on the back and it's not legal. He drives that assault vehicle through Los Angeles into Beverly Hills and parks it, leaves it running on the front lawn of the house of Limp Bizkit that they're rehearsing in. He got out. He gets out of this military vehicle with no shirt. His hair is in a samurai bun on top of his head. His jeans are held up with a strand of rope and combat boots held together by duct tape.
I mean, that's a
and he has a gun in his hand.
That is an all-time moment. Like if you, because Eddie Van Halen at that time, if that was early 2000s, I still think a shit ton. I don't know if a lot of people recognize Eddie Van Halen just out in the street now, but then it was probably more likely. And then now. LA. But I think you noticed, you're like, is that fucking Eddie Van Halen rolling by in an armored vehicle with a turret and a samurai bun on his head?
But I feel like in LA, that's a Tuesday. Like that. You know,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That asshole answered the door. Bennett said that Van Halen told him of the incident. I put my gun to that stupid fucking red hat of his, and I said, where's my shit, motherfucker? So this is Eddie talking to Fred Durst. That fucking guy just turned to one of his employees and starts yelling at him to grab Eddie's shit, grab Eddie's shit. Eddie Van Halen stood on the front lawn of a residential home in Beverly Hills in broad daylight, smoking a cigarette while holding a gun on Fred Durst as he went back and forth from the house to the assault vehicle, lugging amps and guitars. So Fred Durst doing the hard work himself so he doesn't get killed by Eddie Van Halen. Think about, and this is from our guy, Coley Mick, who works here, who is a
I just was reading every blog I could find about it. This happened. I guess this news came out originally in around 2020, and Coley blogged it. And I was cracking the fuck up reading his. So I wanted to give our guy Coley some shine too.
Yeah. Coley said, think about how pants shittingly terrified Fred Durst must have been in this scenario. You think you just pissed off some old man beyond his years, afraid of a little weed, and you'll never see him again. Next thing you know, he calls you just to turn your like basically, long story short, it's just fucking crazy that this happened. So it's just a crazy story. And little known fact, as we were looking into it, Fred Durst served in the Navy. I didn't know this. for 2 years before he joined.
What?
Yes, he served in the Navy for 2 years.
Now that's ridiculous.
There's other photos of him in uniform. It says Durst in little letters on his uniform. And apparently he dipped out of the Navy to become a tattoo artist instead, and eventually wound up in Limp Bizkit. Who knows if he was kicked out or if I couldn't find much about his time at service. I found a couple Reddit pages that were like, did anybody serve with him? Did anybody know him? No, blah, blah, blah.
I wonder if his dad was, because he's a Jacksonville guy. And there's a huge Navy population in Jacksonville. I wonder if his dad was a Navy guy too. Old Fred Durst. I would never would have thought that he'd be a Navy dude.
Yeah, not to stereotype, but going off the description of Eddie Van Halen in the military vehicle with the combat boots on, you'd think he was veteran goofing a little bit.
He really would,
being angry. And this explains Fred Durst's song, chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water. That's lunch on a Navy ship.
True.
That is exactly what that's like. So
I mean, that is essentially that World War II cookbook that I bought. Like that was some of the fucking recipes that they would have, like meat and water.
Mm-hmm. Rolling. That's a boat on the sea.
Mm-hmm.
Break stuff. That's
I think it's interesting.
Drunk Navy guys coming back from a night out.
Yeah. Just the music industry in general. He's another example of how hard it is to be relevant for a very long time. Because I think most people in the music industry are kind of like Fred Durst, where they were the top of the top, so popular for a 2 to 3 year or 5 year span. Like when we were growing up, like Fred Durst was everywhere. And now Fred Durst probably plays somebody's bat mitzvah for $5,000 just to make ends meet, and nobody really cares about him. So
I think that's because struggle makes art. Like if you look at a lot of the major, like if you're in a grungier type of music, obviously this doesn't apply if you're Yo-Yo Ma, but if you're in things like trap music, like you coming up from the streets, and the same thing with Fred Durst and where he grew up in Jacksonville, like you have that struggle and that lends to art. When you're a multi-millionaire, you can't really, like Eminem, how many times can you possibly make an album about being the best rapper in the world?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can only do it so many times. He only went across 8 Mile once. Once you're super rich, nobody gives a fuck about your struggle. You're Eminem now. You have $100 million. You're rich as shit.
True. You lose that street cred.